Joining us now is our U.S. correspondent, Simon Marks, outside the South African Embassy in Washington. This as Ambassador Rasool prepares to return to South Africa this weekend. A very good evening to you, Simon. Well, there we have it. It is D-Day for our former Ambassador, Ibrahim Rasool. I'm assuming he's already vacated that office already and making his way either to the airport or already in the skies. We expect him tomorrow. What's it like there right now at outside those offices of the South African Embassy?
Yeah, I have to say it is pretty extraordinary standing here and reflecting on the fact that exactly 1 week ago it was business as usual at this embassy because Secretary of State Marco Rubio had not yet posted his social media tweet announcing that Ibrahim Rasool was persona non grata in the United States. That didn't take place until late on Friday, Washington time. Today it feels like a perfectly normal day at this embassy. We do not know the whereabouts of now the former ambassador. Remember that his diplomatic privileges and immunity was stripped earlier in the week by the State Department. Since then, he has been a private citizen under orders to depart the country by the end of today, Friday, here in the United States. I mean, our assumption, I think, is that he's going to be leaving on some kind of an overnight flight tonight. It will not be a non-stop, assuming he's flying commercial, because there is no non-stop flight to Johannesburg or Cape Town from Washington, D.C. this evening, so perfectly possible that he will be making a stop in Doha or in Istanbul or somewhere else, perhaps in the United States, on his way back to South Africa. Also worth reflecting on the fact that statue that you can see behind me, of former President Nelson Mandela, standing proudly outside this embassy, was a gift to the United States by the South African people. And there's an inscription at the base of the statue that quotes from Madiba's speech to a joint session of Congress here in Washington in June of 1990. And the inscription reads, in part, "Let's keep our arms locked together so that we form a solid phalanx against racism." Well, here we are, 35 years after that speech was made, and it certainly doesn't feel like the United States and South Africa are any longer, with Donald Trump at the helm here in Washington, D.C., forming any kind of a phalanx with arms locked together on anything, a fact that is being underscored by the events that we're going to be witnessing here today with the departure of Ibrahim Rasool from this embassy, an embassy, of course, that he led with great distinction during Barack Obama's presidency, and then he was returned here last November by President Ramaphosa to try and steer things forward as South Africa and the rest of the world prepared for the transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. Clearly, it has not gone the way the ambassador or President Ramaphosa wanted, but the ambassador, in a posting to friends, said he has no regrets about the manner of his departure from the United States. It is what it is, he wrote.
Now, Simon, as you're quoting that inscription as well, that is left on that statue, in a different time when there were better relations, of course, between South Africa and the United States. I also want to take it back today as we commemorate Human Rights Day in South Africa. Our former Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor, was saying that, look, leadership, if you're in South Africa or South African right now, having to work with the United States is very difficult. It's not the time that you also speak of a time when we're keeping our arms locked together. What kind of a vacuum is South Africa not having an ambassador there in the United States going to have, do you think, for now? Because we do know that our presidency has said that they're not going to rush replacing former Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool.
Well, it's never obviously great when any embassy is left without a captain of the ship with a hand on the tiller. And I think that there will obviously be pressure on government there to select a future ambassador. And then we have to see if it is someone that is going to prove acceptable to the Trump administration. Because remember, the US government can reject an ambassadorial nominee in exactly the same way, by the way, as the South African government could reject Donald Trump's choice when he makes it to be the next US ambassador to South Africa. There is, as you know, a lot of speculation that that choice could be Joel Pollak of Breitbart News, whose articles about Ibrahim Rasool really sparked the decision by Secretary of State Marco Rubio to force him out of the country, and who has been a persistent critic of the South African government here in Washington, D.C., and he's definitely a man with Donald Trump's ear. As far as those comments by Naledi Pandor are concerned, she's obviously very well known in this town, and when she last visited, I think it was on her last visit here during the Biden administration, she made a speech at a Washington think tank in which she said at the time that South Africa particularly, and Africa more generally, was still waiting for an apology from the US government, any US government, for the remarks, the scatological remarks that had been made about some African countries reportedly by President Trump during his first term in office. So even at that point, she was, I think, very clear about the complexities that had existed in the relationship between the first Trump administration and governments all over Africa. And those complexities are now only underscored by the fact that in this Trump administration, this President Trump is not surrounded by the restraining influences that existed during his first term. The Washington specialists, the experts, the moderate Republicans who have not shown fealty to his Make America Great Again movement, they find no place in this government whatsoever. And so when Marco Rubio says, I'm going to expel the South African ambassador, and President Trump says, as he has done repeatedly, that the South African government is actively expropriating Afrikaner farms without compensation, even though that has not happened, when he expresses that kind of disinformation, there are no voices in his ear saying, just hold on a second, are you absolutely sure we want to take this bilateral relationship into the abyss? And that is where it finds itself tonight. It's a sad day here in terms of the bilateral relationship. It is tonight at its lowest point ever, even lower than it ever was during the apartheid era.
Sure. Now, Simon, I believe it is this evening as well, probably around your time or around our time, not sure yet, but it is today that Elon Musk will be meeting with the Pentagon, I believe. Now, speaking of people who do have the ear of President Donald Trump, Elon Musk is one of those such individuals as well. Can we speak a little bit, just in closing, about his role as well, and now considering on the back of him having a meeting with the Pentagon?
Yeah, so that Pentagon meeting has actually taken place. It took place this morning. The White House is absolutely pushing back on reports that there was a plan to present Elon Musk with a briefing about the highly secret, classified potential plans for the United States to wage war against China if it ever came to that. They say this was a routine meeting. President Trump in the Oval Office within the last hour has said that this was all about Elon Musk trying to understand expenditure at the Pentagon as part of his campaign to crack down on waste and fraud in the government as he leads that so-called Department of Government Efficiency, which of course is not a US government department formally at all. I mean, there is no question, though, that Mr. Musk's presence at the Pentagon over the last few hours underscores the fact that he is very much continuing to act as President Trump's de facto prime minister. He also has been very critical of President Ramaphosa's government, critical of the Expropriation Act over his own social media platform X. And he's not the only influential South African or person connected to South Africa with access to Donald Trump's ear. I mean, others include Peter Thiel, the corporate behemoth who founded the PayPal empire. And again, one of the difficulties that this embassy has had is in forging dialogue with the Trump administration and trying to get Pretoria's version of events and information about what's happening from the South African government to the Trump administration. Those other voices connected to South Africa are absolutely dominant in the White House at the moment, and the big challenge for whoever comes in and helms this embassy is going to be to try and figure out if there is any way of establishing dialogue at the highest levels between this embassy and the State Department and the White House. It's going to be very challenging.
Challenging indeed. Simon Marks, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your time standing outside of the South African embassy in Washington. That's our correspondent, Simon Marks.